motor impulses the other way. You could run the rams by guess and hope, even if you can't feel them. Okay. One split second later, they don't. Nothing happens. Good thinking, though. I tried to think of something to say while I untied myself from the couch. What came out was, "It's been a pleasure knowing you, Eric. I've liked being half of this team, and I still do. Get maudlin later. Right now, start checking my attachments. Carefully." I swallowed my comments and went to open the access door in the cabin's forward wall. The floor swayed ever so gently beneath my feet. Beyond the 4-foot square access door was Eric. Eric's central nervous system, with the brain perched at the top and the spinal cord coiled in a loose spiral to fit more compactly into the transparent glass and sponge plastic housing. Hundreds of wires from all over the ship led to the glass walls, where they were joined to selected nerves which spread like an electrical network from the central coil of nervous tissue and fatty protective membrane. Space leaves no cripples, and don't call Eric a cripple because he doesn't like it. In a way, he's the ideal spaceman. His life support system weighs only half what mine does, and takes up 1/12 as much room. But his other prosthetic aids take up most of the ship. The ramjets were hooked into the last pair of nerve trunks, the nerves which once moved his legs, and dozens of finer nerves in those trunks sensed and regulated fuel feed, ram temperature, differential acceleration, intake aperture dilation, and spark pulse. These connections were intact. I checked them 4 different ways without finding the slightest reason why they shouldn't be working. "Test the others," said Eric. It took a good 2 hours to check every trunk nerve connection. They were all solid. The blood pump was chugging along, and the fluid was rich enough, which killed the idea that the ram nerves might have gone to sleep from lack of nutrients or oxygen. Since the lab is one of his prosthetic aids, I let Eric analyze his own blood sugar, hoping that the liver had goofed and was producing some other sugar compound. The conclusions were appalling. There was nothing wrong with Eric. Inside the cabin. "Eric, you're healthier than I am." "I could tell. You look worried, and I don't blame you. Now you'll have to go outside." "I know. Let's dig out the suit." It was in the emergency tools locker, the Venus suit that was never supposed to be used. NASA had designed it for use at Venusian ground level. Then they had refused to okay the ship below 20 miles until they knew more about the planet. The suit was a segmented armor job. I had watched it being tested in the heat and pressure box at Caltech, and I knew that the joints stopped moving after 5 hours and wouldn't start again until they had been cooled. Now I opened the locker and pulled the suit out by the shoulders and held it in front of me. It seemed to be staring back. "You still can't feel anything in the ramjets?" "Not a twinge." I started to put on the suit, piece by piece, like medieval armor. Then I thought of something else. "We're 20 miles up. Are you going to ask me to do a balancing act on the hull?" "No, wouldn't think of it. We'll just have to go down." The lift from the blimp tank was supposed to be constant until takeoff. When the time came, Eric could get extra lift by heating the hydrogen to higher pressure, then cracking a valve to let the excess out. Of course, he'd have to be very careful that the pressure was higher in the tank, or we'd get Venusian air coming in and the ship would fall instead of rising. Naturally, that would be disastrous, so Eric lowered the tank temperature and cracked the valve, and down we went. "Of course there's a catch," said Eric. "I know. The ship stood the pressure 20 miles up. At ground level, it'll be 6 times that." "I know." We fell fast, with the cabin tilted forward by the drag on our tail fins. The temperature rose gradually. The pressure went up fast. I sat at the window and saw nothing but black. But I sat there anyway and waited for the window to crack. NASA had refused to okay the ship below 20 miles. Eric said, "The blimp tank's okay, and so's the ship, I think. But will the cabin stand up to it?" "I wouldn't know." 10 miles. 500 miles above us, unreachable, was the atomic ion engine that was to take us home. We couldn't get to it on the chemical rocket alone. The rocket was for use after the air became too thin for the ramjets. 4 miles.